All right, welcome back to your destination for everything heavy. Today, I am here with Lucas Woodland of Holding Absence. Lucas, how about you go and introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Lucas from Holden Absence. How are you, dude? You good?
I'm doing all right. So you're about to release your third full-length album, The Noble Art of Self-Destruction, on August 25th. Tell me about like the creative process and kind of, when the record initially was like the writing when it started and now, how it's evolved to now when it's releasing.
Yeah, so it was an interesting album to create, to be honest. It was kind of like the first time we'd ever written an album whilst being like a full-time band, you know. So it was interesting because with The Greatest Mistake of My Life, I worked at a music shop and Scott, our guitarist, worked at a coffee shop, and we would kind of meet up every few days and we'd slowly chip away at it. But now, we're touring like 8 months of the year, and it was kind of tough, to be honest, because it was like when we get home, we want to just relax. But
Yeah.
if we don't write this album now, it's not going to be out for years and years and years to come. So yeah, we kind of wrote it last summer for the most part. But we would do 5-day weeks in the office, and we would really try and take it as seriously as we could. And I think it's cool as well because you can kind of tell. I think it sounds like the most professional album we've ever done,
Mm.
which I think is cool. So
Yeah, everything like transitions. And it's not like The Greatest Mistake of Life didn't already do that, but I feel like just
mm,
it's so fluid with all the transitions and just the production. Everything's just kind of a step up with the professionalism, like you kind of
cool.
mentioned. So I would definitely second that. One thing I've noticed is so far you've released 4 singles, two of which are very high energy with a Crooked Melody and Scissors, kind of almost in more of like a punk leaning direction than some of your
Yeah,
previous stuff. I was super curious about like the influences of like 2000s emo and anything like that
yeah.
that might be on the record, especially like on the opening track Head Prison Blues. Like I
Mm.
noticed a lot of emo influence on that, so I was just kind of curious, like if you
Cool. Oh,
that.
I'm glad to hear that because yeah, when we so basically with for specifically Head Prison, we said to ourselves, like what can we do that we haven't done before? You know what I mean? It's like, so for the last two albums, if we did this specific thing, let's not do it. Let's try and switch it
Yeah.
up, So the first two albums had like a minute swell into like an
Mm,
explosive kind of song, and I love that, and I'm proud of both those songs that open both those albums. But for this one, it was like I want to absolutely hammer through it, and like you said, there is a real punk kind of energy to Head Prison.
mm,
um and like I'm so glad, you're one of the first kind of interviews I've really done for this whole process. But
yeah.
it's nice to hear that you've mentioned about it sounding like a 2000s emo song because it was super super inspired by Taking Back Sunday. I
I
just
I
like,
can hear it. Yeah,
yeah,
I can hear it.
cool
Yeah.
man, yeah, because like
Yeah,
Louder
that's
Now
like
is one of
my
my
stuff.
favorite
So
albums. Yeah, cool man.
yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to Louder Now like so much when we were writing this album,
Nice.
and I remember thinking, which song is it? Is it What's It Feel Like to Be a Ghost or whatever?
Mm,
I just
yeah.
remember thinking, what a cool way to open an album.
Yeah, I think it just has like there's an energy that opening just has to it that I feel like just
Yeah,
grabs you immediately. It's definitely my favorite opening track you guys have put out so far. Like just
cool.
it
Oh, that's
just
great to
it's
hear.
probably my favorite song on the record actually. Like it just
Cool. Okay,
hooks
nice.
you right in there and I love that about it. You guys also with Honeymoon, you kind of showed a softer side of the band and there's like softer stuff on the previous records, but this is just like a different take on like the more ballad type of stuff you do before. I feel like I noticed a lot of like kind of it's like almost Coldplay-ish, but again like that 2000s
Yeah,
sort of
dude.
uh
Yeah.
thing. So I just thought that was interesting. Uh
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because when we've done kind of like, I kind of hate the term like ballad or whatever because it
mm,
almost feels like a dirty word. You know what I mean? But I
yeah.
think when you think about like our song Marigold on the first, it's just a piano. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
and I think Honeymoon really feels like to me is like a step closer towards that, but it still is
Yeah,
touching
it's
base with
grandiose.
the band. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, man. And that song, I mean, that song was just inspired by. I remember, like, I picked up a guitar and I just said to myself, what would "Where Is My Mind" sound like if Deftones covered it,
I hear that.
And like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, dude.
Especially that opening
Sick.
acoustic guitar there. I could hear
Yeah,
like, where's my mind on
yeah,
that? Yeah.
for sure. And like
That's
that was the
sick.
goal, and I think it's cool because some people say it sounds like Smashing Pumpkins, some people say it sounds like Deftones,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of my favorite thing about Holding Absence as a band and this album as a whole is like, I think we draw so much inspiration from so many different places that we don't sound like any one band.
Yeah.
But every 30 seconds we sound like a different band, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because you guys have your own distinct style and sound that you're consistent with, but there's also like just little influences just kind of in different spots that just kind of like wait, that's kind of unexpected, or just like,
yeah, for sure.
It just differentiates things a little bit. Like you can never fully pinpoint like what even the genre would be, honestly. It's just rock, like, it's just really good. It's creative, and I really enjoyed that about your music. It's very unique.
Thank you, man.
So what was the process like, kind of going from The Greatest Mistake of My Life to this record, and having been a much bigger band, but then also just trying to figure out, okay, we have this sound, our fans like this sound, but we want to kind of innovate on that further. What was there like anything different with the writing process this time around, just in that nature? Or
yeah, great question, because I think a main thing to note about this album is that we almost did a far more progressive concept album. And basically we just said to ourselves, like, hang on a minute now, like, let's not rush, because we've still got time, and our fans have loved The Greatest Mistake and love this kind of era. So I don't want to say like, let's do it again. You know what I mean? That definitely wasn't the way we, but it was like, let's just one slow, confident step forwards rather than trying to run off and losing everyone, So with this album, it was very much like being in touch with what we love about our band and what we loved about The Greatest Mistake, and how can we evolve it, but not evolve it too much, and how can we, more than anything, make sure that the quality is consistent. Because a big thing about this album for us was like, and this is no slight on our old stuff at all, but like, I feel like, we had like the intro and the outro and the interlude on the last album. And then we had Marigold and we had Purge and a minute-long intro on the first album. And I wanted this album to be the first one that the listener wouldn't like maybe want to skip a song. You know what I mean? I really didn't want it to be like, bored of this, like, let's go to the next one.
It's one of those things where, like, if you're listening to the record on a playlist on shuffle and then the interlude comes on, you're like, oh man, it's an interlude. Like,
for sure. Yeah. And like, I just wanted to make sure that every single song, and I know people say this about their albums all the time, and like, truth be told, like, hands up, like I was saying, we were thinking of doing a far more concept album for this one. Like, I'm sure album 4 will be like super conceptual, and we'll have quite a few songs that might not hit everyone, But for this, it was, let's just try and write 10 singles, man. And not in a cheesy way, but in like every song could be listened to on its own.
Yeah.
And also as an album, it's just this whole collection of bangers,
Yeah. All the songs just work really well cohesively as a record. I feel like I listened to a couple of them just kind of as singles, just to see what they were like just as individual songs. And I feel like just the overall album experience just enhances them so much, and like to where they're already enjoyable as singles, but like especially with the transition between Head Prison and A Crooked Melody, like A Crooked Melody just hits so much harder after Head Prison. Like, it's crazy.
I love to hear that. That's great to hear, because we always say it, we're an album band, it's like, and like,
The Greatest Mistake is very difficult to listen to like without album context. I feel like every time I hear a song from that record, I'm like, oh, I want to hear the next song on that album,
Dude, I love that, man. That's the goal, is like, we want it to be a massive cinematic experience, and we want to make sure that, I mean, this is the thing as well, is like, we want to make sure that every song is listenable in its own right. But I think, man, it's just elevated so much as an album, and I think at the moment I'm kind of wishing the days away, because it's like I almost want people to get the album as a whole, like, rather than just listen to one song and be like, I'm not sure about it or whatever. I want to be like, trust me, when Scissors goes into Honeymoon, is like,
it's so good, so much better. Like, it's just so cohesive and everything. All of my favorite records are like have transitions and things like that. And I just think it just, I really appreciate when it's like a cohesive body of work and like art, rather than just, a bunch of singles thrown together. and I think the songs stand out on their own and on the record, and it's just really good.
Thank
The
you.
Greatest Mistake of My Life was one of my favorite records of the year it came out. Was it 2021?
21, yeah, it was,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it was probably my favorite record of that year. So I was really excited to
Thank
see
you.
kind of how things progressed into this one. Going back to Greatest Mistake of My Life, In Circles was like a really big song for me during that year. I would say
Okay,
if
yeah.
2020 was like the worst year of my life, 2021 was probably second. So
Okay,
that
okay,
was
yeah.
like kind of that song helped get me through a lot
For
that
sure.
I was going through
Thank you,
emotionally
man.
and mentally. And I think I've noticed that, especially just amongst your fan base and talking with people, I feel like your music genuinely impacts people and for the better. And that's something that I really noticed with this record. It opens with kind of more of like a darker sort of song where, like with Head Prison, it says, "My head is a prison. I'm losing the will to go on." But then at the
Mm.
very end of the album, with Angel and the Marble, it ends with, "I'm a puzzle. I'm a painting. I'm a work of art in the making," with a positive note. I thought that
Oh,
was really
dude,
cool. I
I'm
thought that
getting
was really
emotional
cool the way
hearing
you
you
ended
talk
that.
about that.
And
Yeah.
I just
Wow.
feel like you don't see like motifs like that in music a lot anymore. And I thought, especially like given how much you've impacted people's lives with, with your songs and like your openness about mental health, I thought that was a really cool thing, just kind of as an album to have that whole thread running through it.
Thank you, man. Because I think, first and foremost, dude, is like this is why I love doing this. What I do so much is because like dude, I'm exactly the same as you, and I'm exactly the same as so many people that we meet on this journey. We just love music. It's
Hmm.
it's really simple, and we go through hard things, but there's one thing that helps us cope, and it's music. So I'm lucky that I get to create it to help, but at the same time, I spent my whole life needing music to help me.
Yeah.
And I think you know, I think it's such a big, important part of the experience I'm a bit older than most of our fans, you know what I mean? And I've
Hmm.
learned things that, I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure you're younger than me. And I think like,
Yeah.
I've lived through things and dude, oh my God, I just think about it over the years. We've had some fans or whatever, and I've watched them in the darkest days of their lives. I've really, they've reached out to me in the darkest days of their lives. And then years later, they've graduated from college and they've got married or they've had kids or they're just
Hmm.
happy. And it's just like, oh man, I'm so grateful to be able to just be a part of that journey with
Hmm.
whoever may be there, on the other side. But that's the big thing though about this album. I wanted it to be a hopeful album at its core. And you're right, The Angel and the Marble, I think is I mean, man, it's my favorite thing emotionally I think I've ever created. I think, but it's like it's just such an epiphany of self acceptance,
Yeah.
And I think if anybody's struggling, that song encourages you. The whole album encourages you to embrace the hardship in life,
Hmm.
And yeah, so thank you. That meant a lot to me, man. So thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome. That's just one of the things where I was listening to it was like my third listen through where I like really was paying attention to the lyrics, and I was like,
Mm.
the way this album opens and the way it ends, it's just honestly kind of wholesome in the way. Like it just kind of
Yeah,
like it just
dude. Do you know
works so well.
it's
And I feel
funny as
like
well because
that
like,
positive like message just really flows through it. And I think that's a lot of
and I
people are
think the
gonna take
middle
that
of the
away from it.
album the
Yeah.
middle of the album is like existential suicide shit. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's
exactly.
it's
Like it just
definitely
goes
it
from that
goes.
dark and then kind of comes
Yeah,
back and then goes back down. But it's like it's authentic, it's real, it's relatable. And I think a lot of people are going to connect to it, especially just, with that last song, especially. So another thing I was very curious about was I feel like the song Death Nonetheless, with it coming out of Honeymoon, it reminded me a lot of No More Roses and In Circles on The Greatest Mistake of My Life. I was very curious
yeah,
if that was like an intentional, like almost homage to that, or if that was just a coincidence.
yeah. Genuinely, it's funny because I think half of it is almost like lazy songwriting, but our all three of our albums have quite a similar
Yeah,
flow, actually.
yeah,
And like yeah, basically, the In Circles, Honeymoon, so No More Roses, Death Nonetheless. They kind of go through similar motions,
yeah.
really. And I feel like Honeymoon and In Circles definitely share DNA, because
Yeah.
I think those songs us our most beautiful, but also our most kind of peaceful, I guess, in a weird way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I would say In Circles especially is more of like a comforting sort of like
Yeah,
sound versus like Honeymoon's like kind of like almost more of like an uplifting,
abrasive.
like a
Yeah,
embracing sort of sound. And I think it just kind of they complement each other just on their own. Like if you listen to them back to back, they just really go well together. Continuing on the record, I kind of want to take a different like a twist here. Tell me about like the aesthetics and art direction for the record. Like I don't know if you had a part in that specifically, but I've noticed all of your records have had a very like distinctive art direction, whether it was the black and white
mm.
on the self-titled and then kind of the 80s-ish film aesthetic that you had going on The Greatest Mistake. And now this one kind of takes some of the influences from Greatest Mistake, but it's very bright and it's got a lot of royal blues and golds and whites in it. So I'm really curious, like what inspired that aesthetic?
Yeah, man. So this has been just in my brain for so long. This whole I've been seeing these things a lot longer than they've been real, you know. But basically the color palette first and foremost. So the album was hugely inspired by Kintsugi, which is the Japanese art form of infusing glue with gold and then essentially mending things. So if you smashed a plate, you would glue it Kintsugi back together, and you'd see the golden cracks.
Mhm.
But it makes it more valuable because there's
Yeah.
gold in it, and so that the whole metaphor of Kintsugi was really important on this album because it was the idea that we as people we will break, but we are better because of that. So anyway, that was a huge thing, and in my head, I always saw like a white and blue Kintsugi china plate. So
Mhm.
that was where the imagery for this whole album came from, was this white, blue, and gold, and that just jumped out at me straight away. So that was very, very, like when I saw this album in my
Yeah.
head, I knew that was the color scheme. And then, God, I don't even know where to begin. The artwork, like I think a big thing to note actually is this idea of putting things together, things being broken, being put back together. Like the idea for a lot of this aesthetic is the idea that this is almost an art project, really.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's an art project for us. But I wanted this album to almost look like someone had handed it in at school. Like the
Yeah.
artwork, I wanted it to look like, and with the stamp being like holding absence, but the handwriting saying the noble art self destruction. There's this idea that it's like a product of holding absence, but at the same
Mhm.
time, it's a personal project. It's handwritten, right? So all of that kind of seeped through, and then yeah, man, I'm trying to think what other stuff. The clothing as well. The clothes that we're wearing, like they're all
Yeah.
covered in gold paint. And I really like the idea of almost feeling like we were kind of wearing the album in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
did
so
notice that with like all the promo pictures, like it matched, like all the clothes matched the album artwork.
dude, and that's the goal, and I'm really fortunate. My girlfriend is a brilliant stylist, and she's really, really
Mhm.
good at like crafty kind of work and stuff like that. So she hand dyed and hand made basically all the clothes,
That's
and
awesome.
it's really cool, man. And even then, we're I think some photos are going to come out, a promo photo shoot that we did quite recently of like a different outfit. And we kind of did a similar thing with that as well, where you had gold on the
Mhm.
blue, and it's just cool because I feel like it's a bottomless pit almost. We can keep pulling from it, and it's really cool because I think it's quite vivid in my head, and I think it's quite vivid to everybody else, I guess. You know what I mean? Which is really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you nailed that aesthetic perfectly and just the vision that you had for it. Like you can really see like now knowing like that's kind of the intention behind it with the kind of the craft sort of look, the art
Yeah,
project sort of look like you can really see that on the artwork and the visuals and everything with it. That's one thing I've always appreciated about Holding Absence is I always feel like your lyrics are always very poetic, but I always felt like the visuals had something to say too. I always feel like they
yeah,
match the records and just the tones and everything just really like exemplify the aesthetics and everything. And I really just think
yeah.
that you guys have always been great with that and just very like the vision that you have is always just really cool, especially as a graphic designer myself. I've always just really appreciated that.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we're very fortunate. We work so closely with our photographer Beth Miller, who does all of our
Mhm.
live stuff. But the three album covers that she's done for us now, I feel like you could hang them in a museum and they'd look
Yeah.
great. You know what I mean? So we're very lucky. But back to the artwork, I guess, I love how like the woman is finally looking forward. That's like one of my favorite things about this new album visually is, if you look at them side by side,
Yeah.
she's looking to the left and she's looking to the right, and this album she's kind of embracing herself. So it was really important that we kind of paid homage to our own artwork, I guess, with this one as well.
Yeah, I did notice that was like a common theme between the records. I didn't quite connect the dots that it was like, oh, she's turning direction each time, but like that's really cool to see now that I've heard that. Earlier you mentioned you really wanted Holding Absence to be a cinematic sort of project, like feels very theatrical and everything. So I noticed you posted on your story the other day that you're now on Letterboxd. So I was very curious. What are some movies that actually have inspired or influenced Holding Absence in any sort of way?
Ooh, wow, what a great question. So the main one that I would say is have you ever seen a TV series called The OA?
I have not. I don't know if I've ever heard of it.
Man, I really urge you to watch season one, specifically season one. But the OA is I won't even begin to delve into it too much because it's just the first season is perfect. But the song "Your Love Has Ruined My Life" was inspired by that because it's essentially talks about how love can transcend the mortal realm, basically. And I love that idea of, the lyrics to that song are, "When I am finally dead, maybe I'll come back as someone else. And after all this pain, I can love you in the end." It's this idea that, like, I'm not really into reincarnation or anything, but it just made me think about love as something that transcends life almost. So that was a huge inspiration for me. I don't want to be too cliche, but obviously, like, anime is a huge thing for me. I love anime.
I mean, you're literally wearing the shirt.
Yeah, I've got a sweet Akira long sleeve one. But I think like Cowboy Bebop was the main visual inspiration for a lot of this album. Actually, if you've watched the False Dawn video, I don't know if you put two and two together. And like the t-shirt designs are quite often actually like inspired by those. So I'm trying to think though, movies aren't really, I love films so much. I go to the cinema once a week, but
oh wow.
Yeah. I really, when I'm home anyway, I'll go. But that's even awesome. On tour, to be honest, I'll just go if there's a cinema nearby. We were on the Plot in Utah, and we would keep parking in, Walmart car parks or whatever for a couple, if we had a day off. And most days there'd be a cinema across the road. So I went to see a film called Suzume one time, and like this is really cool. But anyway, I love the cinema. But I really think of a concrete inspiration for another song. Maybe I'm drawing a bit of a blank here, but it's a great question though. So I just wish I had a better answer.
One thing, since it is a hot topic, I wanted to ask, since I did notice that it was on there, the Barbenheimer feature. What were your thoughts on those two movies?
Both. I thought they were brilliant for different reasons. I don't think they were perfect movies. I think Barbie tried to do something that was almost impossible and did pull it off. But I think there are sacrifices to be made when you make a film so on the nose and so, kind of with such subtext to it, I guess, So, yeah, they were. I will say, though, I thought that film was genuinely really, really funny. And then Oppenheimer, I thought was sensational and just like really like, man, like it made me think, and it made me feel as well. It was really, really, really good. But I said this to my girlfriend on the way out. I think if they chopped 45 minutes off, and I don't think the film would have been much worse for it. It was. I think it was a story within a story within a story.
Yeah, there was like kind of three distinct stories that like each hour was its own story, and it was all great. But I do feel like it did feel a bit long. Yeah, I did the double feature where I watched one in the morning and then one afterwards.
I couldn't.
Yeah, I took a break for lunch, but yeah.
No. But the other thing I'd say as well, just on the topic, man, is that new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie is so good.
I haven't seen it yet.
Man, I think you'll love it. It's so good.
Nice.
So I'd urge anyone to watch that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought both movies were really good visually speaking. Like I felt they both had their own distinct styles, and really like just the set designs and everything was great. And
brilliant performances from the actors.
The performances were phenomenal. I mean, I think I saw a tweet that was talking about Robert Downey Jr. and Ryan Gosling being like contenders for supporting cast actor of the year. Yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
Anyway, that was a little detour, but wanted to get into that.
I love a good detour.
So you mentioned touring with The Plot in You earlier. I went to that tour. It was great. All the bands crushed it. You guys are easily my favorite set. I just the energy and everything was just fantastic. And you guys were touring with Thornhill on that tour. They played right before you guys, and now you're playing with Thornhill again over in Europe. So I'm kind of curious, like, do you want to elaborate on that at all, or?
Yeah, man. I think it's funny because we did our first America tour supporting Dayseeker and
Mhm.
Thornhill. We were actually like rotating main support actually, so we were kind of like we kind of had the same slot almost, which was interesting. And myself and I mean, we're best friends with those guys anyway. But I got along really well with Jacob, the vocalist, just because I
Mhm.
think we very quickly respected each other. I think we really valued what the other person did as a performer, and also, they're Australian, we're British, and we're both doing our first America tour together.
Yeah.
And it's tough, it's scary. There's a lot, especially as a vocalist. So I think we really like lent on each other for kind of
Mhm.
like emotional support really during that tour, which was great. And then when we find out they're on the Plotting You tour a year later, it's just like, oh my god, we can't believe our luck. And at that point, we had already been in talks with them about
Mhm.
kind of swapping tours essentially. But I think it's great because we're very different bands, but we share some really cool common threads amongst our bands as well. You know what
For
I mean?
sure. I think
So
especially visually, like I feel like there's just
yeah,
something about just the emphasis on the visuals and aesthetics
yeah,
that both you and Jacob have that I think
yeah,
really
dude.
just kind of blends the two.
Like me and Jacob talk about like everything for hours. We'll talk
Yeah.
about like we'll show each other references and and stuff like that. And I love having a friend that is so creative in that world
Mhm.
that I feel like I'm on a similar kind of level to. It's really good to have actually. It's inspiring.
They've been crushing it too with both their records. Like they're so good.
Oh man.
So yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think they're genuinely, I think they're better live as well. You know what I mean?
Mm.
They're
Oh
one of
yeah,
those
for
bands
sure.
that like, yeah, I almost can't listen to the albums because I felt so in love with their live performance.
Yeah, the Dark Pool was definitely one of my favorite like metalcore records. Like I think I've
Mm.
heard. Like it's so good.
Yeah, I
Uh
think though Heroin is super super underrated as well. I
yeah,
think
it's very underrated.
any other band
I
put
was
that
a
out.
defender of that album when it came out.
Yeah,
Like
good. Yeah, sick.
yeah, I had reviewed it and it was funny because I was it took so many listens to like understand. I feel like there's
Yeah.
just so much going on in that record to like try
Mm.
to like make sense of it. And like one thing I helped me was like I created a mood board for like the review. Like I literally
Nice.
found photos of like the aesthetic and I was like, okay, let's try to get like fully like immersed in this
Immersed.
album.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And feel like that's when like it really clicked with me and I was like, oh, this is really sick. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of looking at it as a metal record. And I really just think it's just kind of just it's rock, but it's also just got a lot of jazz influences, and it's just very experimental and
Shoegaze.
shoegaze,
Yeah.
yeah, like almost an avant-garde sort of thing to an extent. So I,
Yeah.
I think that's really cool, and I think just it really is underrated, and a lot of people just completely misunderstood it. Also, you guys are touring with Census Fail
Mm.
this year, so how did that come to happen?
I don't know to be honest. We got sent the offer. It would have been February now, and yeah, it was just a kind of a no-brainer for us, really, because it was like,
You're
I
finally
think the
touring with a
thing,
big emo band.
yeah, yeah, but I think it's cool because it's like we've done. I mean, hey, you probably didn't even know our band at this point, but in 2019
I actually
we
did.
had. Did you? Okay, so you might
Yes.
you might know
Yeah.
this then. Yeah. So in 2019 we got offered a tour with Being as an Ocean in America, and our visas got denied, so we couldn't go. And then
Rip.
COVID happened, so 2 years later, we're just like, dude, we were supposed to tour America, and now we've never been. And the defeatist in me was like, we'll never go either because
Yeah.
knowing my luck, it's never going to happen. And now I'm talking to you, and we're about to do this September tour, and when we do that tour, we'll have done 4 American tours in 24 months. In 2 years,
Crazy.
we'll have done 4 American tours, and
Crazy.
two of them are with who I perceive to be the best kind of modern bands in our genre, Dayseeker and Plotting You. And
Mhm.
then three of them are like legacy kind of scene bands in Silverstein,
Yeah.
Amity, Affliction, and Senses Fail. So for us, it's just like, wow, like we fit in with the contemporary and the kind of nostalgia, I guess.
Yeah.
And and we're doing it on the world's biggest stage, which is Tour in America. So we're just ecstatic, dude. I cannot tell you how excited I am to come back, you know?
It's been so cool to see you guys grow, especially once you started touring America. I feel like just I started seeing more and more people talk about you guys, and it was like really cool to see because I had
Yeah.
discovered y'all. I think it was early 2019. It was like
Okay.
right before self-titled actually came out. I like
Cool.
first
Yeah.
like started hearing some little bit of buzz from the singles and stuff. I checked it out. I was like, oh wow, this is really good. So it was really cool. Like 2 years later to see, oh, they're coming to America and people are starting to take notice of them. I thought that was really sick. And
Yeah.
I think also I saw a podcast interview. It was the Downbeat with Sabian from
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Alpha,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
talking about like how I feel like there were certain bands that just kept at it during the pandemic and the lockdowns. They just kept at it, kept refining their craft, refining their live shows to an extent with what they could. And they just never stopped. And then sure enough, now they're the ones that are touring America for the first time just in the last couple of years and really starting to pop off, you know, them included. But you guys were one of the first bands I kind of thought of when he said that, like you guys, Stag Dress, Loathe, all those different bands from
Yeah.
over in that area. Like I feel like just you guys did a really good job with just kind of bridging the gap, you know, through the lockdowns and then coming over to America. Now you're blowing up with over 1 million monthly listeners and everything, and just like so
It's
sick to
crazy.
see.
Yeah. Thank you, man. No, I appreciate it. I think, you know, a big part of that was that the greatest mistake of my life had been recorded months before COVID.
Mhm.
So in our minds, we were ready to tour. You know, we were ready
Yeah.
to tour the world, and then the pandemic happened. But it's cool, like you said, though. You know, Static Dress, Loathe, us. You know, Sleep Token. You know, like the
Yeah.
UK scene is crushing
It's
it right now,
it's
and we're
cracked.
lucky to be a part of it. Yeah, yeah.
It's so
We're
good.
really lucky. Same with Australia, though. You know, I
Yeah,
think
no, they're always
there's
crushing it. They've been
definitely
crushing
like
it for like decades now. Well, we're about to run out of time. Is there anything you want to plug, you know, the album, socials, anything like that? Feel free to do that now. Thank you so much for
you,
doing this. This was a blast. I've been wanting to do this for
man,
forever. So
generally you crushed it, man. I've loved
yeah.
this chat. Thank you so much. And you know, to anyone listening, you know, we're touring America, Australia, Europe for the next 4 months, and the album comes out really soon. So lots of things to look forward to. But thank you for a lovely chat, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me on and everything. So thank you. Have a good one.
Take care. Have a lovely night. Bye.